official.
We're so close. We're like, go!
All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much for coming on out today. Our first official Bridge Series, right? So this has been something that we've been kind of dreaming about to kind of create an environment for everybody to be able to learn, for everybody to sweat, and then obviously get some good hydration and food. Our Bridge Series today is sponsored by Rebel down in Tower City. They just opened up a second location down in Columbus. And we also have a sponsor, Numa, for our hydration. All of the Numas that are in the back corner where the fridge is in the cubby area, those are free for you today.
What?
Take as many as you like. Rebel will be coming here in about an hour. They're going to have the full spread that'll be outside. It is set up a la carte. They are bringing burritos for us. And they are first come, first serve. You guys self-serve yourself. Okay. Couple things about what to expect today, especially here at Black Flag. You're going to notice if this is your first time here, or one of the first times here, you guys are going to see a lot of high energy. Okay. If you guys take a look back here, we have some of the best staff. We have Coco here, Zach, Grant, Alina, Coach Powell, Coach Laz in the back. He was the guy who was getting you signed. We have Coach Tom Reedy, the owner of Black Flag Athletics. Let's give him one big hand. We'll get to this guy here with the shirt on here in a second here. The work hard shirt. What you guys are expecting today, we're going to be going through Dr. Dani's going to be going through a talk about stress, the elephant in the gym, how we can manage our stress and maximize health and performance. He's going to speak for about 25-30 minutes. There'll be a Q&A afterwards. We'll take about 5-7 minutes to have a social. You guys will be able to grab some Numa, hang out. We're going to take out the chairs, set up some boxes, set up some kettlebells, and then we're going to go through warm up, go through the workout, which we'll go over in a little bit, and then we'll do a cool down, and then afterwards we'll have some time to be able to talk and eat some good food. Sound good? Okay. Sounds great. So hey, I just want to talk about Dr. Danny Urcuyo. We have the luxury of having him here on site in his office. He's been an invaluable asset to us, especially on things that extend beyond our scope. Just a couple things about Danny. In terms of CrossFit, he started CrossFit back in 2008 while in college. He competed at the 2011 Reebok CrossFit Games for Team Hyperfit USA. He has been a CrossFit Coach Level 1 since 2011, and he has coached in person and most recently virtually. Education-wise, he did his undergrad at the University of Michigan with a degree in microbiology. In medical school, he has a Cleveland Clinic Learner College of Medicine with a special qualification in biomedical research. His residency was at the Cleveland Clinic through family medicine, and his training with the Institute of Functional Medicine and the Kresser Institute. He is currently a staff physician and medical director at SteadyMD, which is a completely virtual primary care platform. He has special interests in disease reversal, health optimization, longevity, and performance optimization. He has been a physician for many CrossFit Games athletes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Danny. You guys hear me okay? Yep. Does this actually help?
Yeah.
It does. Okay, great. All right. So we're going to be talking about stress, as you guys probably guessed. This is something that we really don't talk too much about. We're really good at talking about fitness, right? How much we work out, how many days a week we work out. Really good at tracking our nutrition, or trying to track our nutrition. We really don't talk about stress all that much. And it's often neglected, I think, oftentimes really for the recreational individual and also for the professional athlete. It's kind of a missing link here that can really propel you to kind of better performance, but I honestly think more better longevity. And I think that's really what we're really all chasing here. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Feel free to interrupt me at any point if you guys have a question. Kind of mix in the Q&A a little bit if you'd like. Totally kind of open, relaxed. But to give you some context about how I think about things, I kind of train in the conventional world, as Pete had mentioned. And they did a really great job of teaching us how to treat diseases with medications and procedures, to be efficient in the 15-minute office visit. That was really good training for the conventional paradigm, but we really weren't able to
reverse any diseases or make people very much better. But I got really good at being able to keep things constant, right? So I did some additional training in the world of functional medicine, which is a framework, to give you guys a little bit of context. It's a framework that looks at disease as happening in the experience of the individual or with the individual, which sounds kind of ridiculous to say, like, people aren't just diseases. But the system, the way it's structured now, has kind of shifted to a point where that's kind of the only thing that physicians are able to focus on because we're so pressed for time and we forget that things are experienced, things are happening to a person, and that person experiences the disease every single day or the issue every single day. It's not just in that doctor's office visit. And what functional medicine tries to do is try to take all the different aspects of an individual. So their sleep, their exercise, their movement, their nutrition, their relationships, all that stuff together in the context and in the understanding that all the body systems work together. So not just the cardiovascular system over here, the pulmonary system over here, the immune system here. And also, it doesn't make sense to see different specialists for that. So functional medicine doctors really try to look at all the different systems together and function as kind of a quarterback. So it's very much kind of like family medicine, but I really think about it like family medicine on steroids because you really look at all the different aspects and it's much kind of deeper than just treating individual issues or diseases. So functional medicine really works at addressing lifestyle factors first and having an understanding of how the body works and trying to reverse disease with that understanding. So that said, these are kind of the key ingredients for health. And if we can optimize these 5 things, I think the majority of the time people at least get better regardless of their chronic condition. That can be rheumatoid arthritis, diseases that we used to think are completely incurable. It can be simple as blood pressure, something like that. But the piece that I think that we neglect most often is really stress. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to define stress and resiliency, how to increase resiliency. We'll talk about that right in detail. We'll talk about exercise as a double-edged sword, then how to maximize resiliency, and then how to actually measure it too. I've got about 60 slides, so we're going to be flying through these. A lot of these are pictures, but I want to keep it kind of interactive. But we'll kind of keep on moving. And if you guys have any questions, definitely just interrupt. We'll be talking about some pretty hot topics like sleep trackers. I know a lot of people wear Whoops and things like that. We can talk a little bit about heart variability. A lot of interesting stuff to cover. So to start, the body's a very dynamic system. So the whole purpose of it is to keep everything inside the body constant. This is the concept of homeostasis. So anything that tries to throw you out of homeostasis is essentially what we call a stressor. And that can be, running, exercising. So if you're exercising, you start to sweat to keep your body temperature normal. Your heart rate's going to increase to give your muscles more oxygen. There's a lot of different things that happen. But the same things happen with psychological stressors, not just physical stressors. Things like giving a presentation, or what are some other things? Having an argument with a significant other or a friend. They cause the exact same responses that exercise really would. So the point being that the body really can't distinguish between these two. And because it can't distinguish between these two, we're often exposed to a lot of stressors. Because in day-to-day life, we're actually exposed to a lot more psychological stress than we are physical stress. Because psychological stress is so prevalent now, our bodies are kind of under constant stress. And we'll dive into that in quite a bit of detail. The point being with this diagram here is that it's just really complex, right? So a lot of hormones have to do with changing your blood sugar levels, how much you sweat, how fast your heart beats, all that stuff. And it's partly regulated by the nervous system, kind of fight or flight, adrenaline, and partly regulated by what's called the HPA axis, so the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. This is commonly what people refer to when they talk about adrenal fatigue. You guys have heard of that term before? Yeah, okay. So it's a little bit of a misnomer, and we'll talk about why that is. But the kind of left side of the diagram, the adrenal glands, it's kind of what happens when you're chronically stressed, that gets affected. When you're acutely stressed, it's more the nervous system that really kind of goes awry. So the stress response. So this is kind of what I just covered. Adrenaline is the primary hormone that deals with the short-term stress response, and all the things that we described happen with adrenaline, like sweating, being nervous, feeling nervous even is actually a nervous system response. So lots of different things play together here to cause kind of an acute response to something that could potentially be damaging to the organism of the person. It's kind of a fight or flight, really, kind of evolved, very, very primitive process. Every animal has it. It's kind of meant to keep us alive. The long-term stress response is kind of more adaptive. And things that if you're chronically stressed, what tends to happen is you have problems regulating your blood sugar, you become less insulin sensitive, your growth hormone actually decreases, which is of course relevant if we're trying to stay strong. You start to become immunosuppressed. This is why if you're, for example, if you have a big project at work or at school, you're more likely to get sick, that kind of thing. Or also very common for endurance athletes after a really, really big race to get sick because of that kind of stress response. So let's define resiliency for a second. I'm gonna define kind of resiliency for myself, and people have defined it in many, many different ways, but I'm gonna kind of provide a structure, if you will, so that you guys can kind of think about this together with me and kind of follow my logic here. So I describe resilience as the ability of the body and mind to return to baseline after a stressor, to return to homeostasis. And the key point here is the mind. So we always talk about the body coming back to normal. You know, you stop your workout, you rest, your heart rate comes down, but we rarely talk about the mind coming back to a stable position, right? Or a kind of a calm position. And I think that if you have a lot of resiliency, that then leads to more stress tolerance, meaning that you're able to deal with more stressors on a daily basis, be it physical or psychological, but also the degree or the severity of the stressor is, if it's more severe, you can tolerate it if you're more resilient. So, good example of this would be, you know, doing grace or Fran or workout, right? The faster you get, the more potent the stimulus, but your body's able to tolerate it, right? Whereas another example is if you were actually lifting a weight, you know, if you get stronger, you're able to tolerate more weight. That's, I think, an increase in resiliency from a physiological perspective. The same thing happens with stress. So if you're thrust into a new work environment, it might be overwhelming that first day, but you learn how to manage, you learn how to cope. And this is a key point. We as human beings are so incredibly adaptive, we can get used to incredible amounts of stress and survive. And think, to some degree, that it's completely normal. So oftentimes when I ask folks, you know, are you stressed? Are you stressed at work or at school or wherever? Most of the time they'll say no, and then we'll do some blood work, and their cortisol levels are through the roof. It's just because people are so incredibly adaptive. So when we talk about stress resilience, or when we talk about resiliency, we're talking about the body being able to maintain kind of normal hormone levels and a normal response, even in the context of a lot of stress, not necessarily that you feel okay. So that's kind of the key point. I think that the more resilient you are, really this is what it means to be healthy. Okay? You've probably seen the CrossFit continuum where you have sickness, wellness, and then fitness, right? And the idea is always to get to the fitness side. You can replace fitness for resiliency, it's the exact same concept. Because if you have resiliency, you've essentially built a hedge to sickness. And you have to become well before you become sick. Does that make sense? So what affects resiliency? Perceived stress, sleep, substances, metabolic disorders, inflammation. We'll talk about the first two quite a bit because it's the things that we as kind of a community, we as individuals, have a lot of power over. So to improve resiliency, we have to minimize stressors, the stressors that we just talked about, and we have to train. But we also have to allow ourselves enough wiggle room to actually for the training to have an effect. Because really what you're doing when you're training, this can be psychological training, this can be fitness, you know, here at the CrossFit gym, you have to have some wiggle room to the point where you can stretch the body and then allow it to recover. But if your body already has too many stressors that it's trying to deal with, that stimulus, be it psychological or physical here in the gym, doesn't stretch the body to the point where it can recover. It actually produces lasting damage, or damage that might have to take some time to repair. Now, the whole concept of working out, it's a damage and then repair process. But if you don't have enough reserve, that damage and repair process becomes a lot more severe, to the point where you're actually not getting the adaptive response anymore. You're causing harm. Really. So one of the best ways to train is obviously doing CrossFit. We have to be very mindful that this is this can be good and bad. And the best way that I've heard this described is that CrossFit is like kind of a weapon, right? It's a gun. It's a loaded gun. An incredibly effective tool in the right hands, and something extremely dangerous in the wrong hands, right? So we have to be mindful. I see this all the time, where this is not meant to be sexist at all. This is just what I see. Most of the time it's women, because of gender roles in current society. We can have a discussion about if that's right or wrong. But they're working, they're taking care of their kids, and they're coming to CrossFit class, and they're maybe getting an additional run, and then they're very fatigued, and they start to look like this camel here, right? Because they're trying to do it all. I see it mostly in women, certainly happens in men for sure, but men don't seek medical help, so that's probably why I don't see what they're on. But this tends to be what happens, right? So people, they have all this stuff going on in life. They say, man, I am so freaking stressed. I just need a good workout, right? And they come in like this. This is kind of what I have in my mind. So the dose matters, right? With anything, the dose makes the poison, if you will. And this is really how I think about CrossFit or exercise. Really, any psychological stressor. There's a sweet spot, right, where it becomes beneficial, and then there's diminishing returns, and then there's the harmful dose. And our goal is really to get to that sweet spot for everything that we do. This is why Tom constantly says we don't want to go hard every single day. This is exactly the reason. Because if we do this, we can keep getting better every single day, and we don't have to spend time, recovering to the point where we're so demolished by a week of training where we can't come back the next day or the next week. So if we're looking for long-term health, the idea is really to stay in that sweet spot. So what are things that drain our gas tank? Perceived stress, poor sleep, and we'll touch a little bit on inflammation. But perceived stress. So as I mentioned, we all experience stress, and most of the stress causes us to actually fall into what's called the sympathetic state. This is our fight or flight response, and our bodies are constantly in this balance with another state which is called the rest and digest state. Perceived stress kind of pushes us to here to the right, and it's influenced by a couple different things. The novelty of the event, the unpredictability of the event, the perceived threat to the body and the ego, and a loss of control. And this can be internal or external. So external can be an argument at work, lots of stress at work, an argument with a spouse, and internal can be kind of more clinical things like depression, anxiety, things that cause activation internally. Now, control is kind of the key factor here because this is really what drives, I think, a lot of things. So we usually have more control over physical stressors than psychological stressors. Physical stressors being, moving objects, moving around. At least it used to be getting, in arguments or fights or fighting off another tribe, that kind of thing. But psychological stressors are different, and they become different because they're more constant. They happen for longer periods of time, particularly nowadays. Perceived stress is extremely chronic, right? So your body can't tell the difference between a tiger attacking you or your notifications on your phone turning off, or being flagged or whatever. So what happens when you get that ping from your iPhone, for example, you immediately perk up, right? That's the exact same perk up response that if you heard something in the bushes, the tiger in the bushes, and immediately your sympathetic nervous system goes through the roof, your heart rate increases, and you're kind of primed to run, pretty much. But this happens multiple times a day. Now with the advent of really iWatches, now you get it on your watch and have it on you constantly. The other things, smart homes are kind of making this even more integrated into our lives, but the idea is here that perceived stress is now kind of a chronic thing. We're now consistently pushed into a sympathetic state, kind of a fight or flight state, something that our bodies were never designed to do. We were meant to kind of run, be attacked, catch our food or whatever, and then we'd come home and we'd sit, and we'd relax. We have these peaks and troughs of stress, and our entire physiology is built that way. But that's not what we're experiencing nowadays. So just to demonstrate a point, I'm going to have you guys close your eyes for a second, and then while you guys have your eyes closed, I'm going to put a picture up here, and I want you to think about the first thing that you feel, and I'll have you kind of tell me in just a second. So go ahead and close your eyes. All right, open your eyes. Think about what you're feeling. All right, anyone want to share what you feel?
I need to get rid of those dots.
Yeah, that's a lot of notifications to clear.
Yeah, so beyond, let's go a little bit deeper. What else did you feel? Like very viscerally, like what was the first response?
I immediately went to the heart before I remember.
I wanted to read the messages.
Yeah.
What do they need? Do I need to be there right now? Like, it's
Yeah.
an emergency. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
My heart rate go up.
Yeah. What do you mean?
I'd be like, I had a great day.
Yeah. So the point being with this exercise is that it can be good, right? These sympathetic triggers can be good. They don't all have to be bad. They definitely don't all have to be bad. And these companies like Instagram or Facebook have gotten really good. They hired the smartest people in the world to make these the most addicting products in the world. So they know these things. Next one. I'm gonna have you close your eyes one more time, just to kind of drive this point home. All right, go ahead and open your eyes. Now what do you
That's how I felt.
Panic, right? The point here is that just our apps, our cell phones, images, these can trigger these exact same emotions that we evolved with. The tiger being over here, and even rewarding experiences. So perceived stress is unavoidable, right? And it's normal. It's part of our everyday lives. But we have to build hedges against this and really bring our nervous system down every single day. We have to do this throughout the day. It's not as simple as doing a full day's worth of work and then coming home and then relaxing. Again, that's not how we were designed. Having light exposure throughout the day, going for walks, even taking naps, these are all ways that we can downregulate our nervous system. In a little bit, I'm going to show you guys a tool that I absolutely love and I recommend to pretty much all my patients to kind of do that on a daily basis about 3 times a day. So, eliminating your exposure to social media and inputs is also critical. How many of you guys check your email more than 5 times a day? Yeah, most of us, right? Very rarely does that make sense, right? And I'm definitely one of those individuals as well. Very few things happen so quickly that we need to check them, every 2 to 3 hours. But it puts us again in this hyper-arousal state. Same thing with social media. So I would say, limiting checking email to twice a day, tops. That would be a much better approach. And really using social media as kind of a treat, knowing that it's not going to downregulate your nervous system. It's actually going to get you more kind of fired up. It's kind of like, watching an exciting movie, something along those lines. But I really want to kind of move people away from this idea that scrolling through Instagram is how they decompress or relax. Because from a scientific perspective, unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. Another great way is taking kind of short little breaks throughout your workday. This is a technique. Have you guys heard of this before? Pomodoro technique. Essentially what you do is you have a task, and then you work on that task for 25 minutes, and you take a 5-minute break. And you do that 4 times, and then you take a longer break after that. Really, really simple, very, very basic, but extremely effective. I would suggest that you guys try this just for 1 day. And it'll be amazing how much longer you're able to work. This is one of the ways that a lot of my friends and I really studied for boards. You can study 9 hours straight with this because you're constantly coming back down to that sympathetic state. It's really, really powerful. So let's talk a little bit about other things that drain the gas tank. Let's talk about sleep. This is probably my favorite thing to talk about. So sleep is intimately tied in with stress. And sleep deprivation actually causes increased cortisol. So with sleep deprivation, as little as 7 hours, less than 7 hours of sleep will actually cause cognitive impairment. That's measured. So sleeping less actually makes you dumber. So if you're trying to get more performance from a psychological perspective, at work, wherever, one of the easiest ways is to sleep. And I tell this all the time to the athletes that I work with. They're like, oh, what supplements should I take? Should I adjust my macros? What should I do? And most of the time, getting more sleep increases their output, their capacity dramatically, more than any supplement or any macronutrient plan ever could. Mood and judgment. Everyone knows this, right? You're sleep deprived, you get more irritable, you get more depressed. But what most people don't know about is this connection with insulin resistance. And insulin resistance you can kind of think about as pre-diabetes. So diabetes, when your blood sugar's out of control, it's dangerous, it damages your blood vessels. Pre-diabetes, meaning you're on the way there, it's still high, it's causing some degree of damage. Insulin resistance is kind of the stage before that, where the ship's kind of pointing towards diabetes. We can easily maneuver that ship in another direction, but we're starting to see the effects of there being problems. Sleeping as little as 4 hours a night actually makes you insulin resistant. And 5 hours per night for 1 week will make you insulin resistant as well. And there's a lot of people who are sleeping less than 5 hours, at least at some point in their lives. So there's a very, very tight connection between metabolic health and your blood sugar. Also, this interests actually most people, is that if you're sleep deprived, it's much, much harder to lose weight. Way harder. They've done studies where they take two groups of people, and they have one group be sleep deprived and another not sleep deprived. In addition to there not being as much weight loss in the group that's sleep deprived, the composition or the proportions of the weight loss is also very different. So people who are sleep deprived will actually lose muscle mass more than people who are not sleep deprived when they're losing weight. So from a body composition perspective, getting enough sleep is also super important. So how much sleep do we need, right? I'm going to ask you guys, what do most people say when they say, I need X amount of sleep? 8 hours, right? Yeah, so I think that makes a whole lot of sense for most people. But if you're sitting in these chairs here, you are not most people. You do CrossFit, right? Which is a very, very potent stimulus. I think for most people that do class, maybe 4 or 5 days a week, it's at least 8 hours. More likely closer to 9, honestly. If you really want to get the biggest bang for your buck. Easy way to determine that is by just sleeping until you wake up, honestly. You do that during vacation, kind of experiment a little bit. But yeah, I really want to drive that point home. If you exercise on a regular basis, more likely than not, you probably need more than 8 hours of sleep. So more sleep equals better performance. And that also allows you a lot more resiliency and a lot more wiggle room to actually go harder in the gym. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between quality and quantity. So quality, we'll talk about kind of this in 3 different stages. We'll talk about what to do before bed, during bed, and after bed, kind of during the day, really. So we're going to take a trip down memory lane. Most of us, when we were put to bed, we got a bath, right? We read a story, we were cuddled, we were loved, we were put in a warm bed, and we fell asleep. Doesn't sound like anything we do nowadays, right? We slept pretty good. So people say they sleep like a baby, right? We don't do that anymore. Now we do this, right? We look at screens. For many different reasons, that's not a good thing. Usually it's work or a movie that's activating, it's exciting, there's drama. We're really not replicating how babies sleep, which is how we were supposed to sleep. So things you can try. For me to tell everyone to meditate would be silly, right? Not everyone loves to meditate. And a lot of people don't do really well with meditation. Their minds race. you exist in this world and you have an iPhone, you probably go type of person, and it's hard to shut down at night. This is where heart math comes in. Have you guys heard of heart math? Okay, it is amazing. So heart math takes advantage of a phenomenon where we all know that the brain communicates with the heart, right? You see something scary, your heart rate increases. But what most of us don't know is that the heart actually communicates with the brain also. And that there are certain patterns with heart rate that are associated with certain emotions. And researchers took a look at this, and they discovered that if they can change the pattern, the pattern of your heart rate, they can actually change your emotions as well. So this device, I thought I had it with me, but it's my own, I'll show you guys later. It clips on your ear, and then it syncs with your iPhone, and the app essentially tells you to breathe in a certain pattern. And what happens is your heart rate changes, potentially, not just beat to beat in terms of your rate, but also how it changes. The heart rate variability, the distance between two beats changes. We all know that higher heart rate variability is good, right? It means that your nervous system is more flexible. But it's also how that heart rate variability changes that's important. So you can see here on the top, kind of a heart rate pattern associated with frustration. I mean, heart rate variability of 80 to 90 is pretty darn good, really, regardless of who you are. But look at that pattern, it's very erratic. It's typically more associated with frustration. And you take a look at the heart rate pattern of someone with appreciation, gratitude. It's a much more smooth pattern. And you can train your body to do this. You can wear this clip essentially for 5 minutes, 3 times a day, and then engage in these breathing exercises that take this data from your heart rate into consideration and push you into kind of a more smooth heart rate variability pattern. And it sounds kind of crazy. It sounds kind of like, make-believe and kind of new age type of stuff, but it's incredibly effective. It's used by, Sinai, by the VA, lots of different big organizations that do their due diligence, and it really, really works. I've seen people come off their anti-anxiety medication just by using this and cure their insomnia. The thing that they don't talk about on their marketing, that kind of thing, is that I think it really helps people release thoughts. What I mean by that is if you've got racing thoughts throughout the day, especially when going to bed at night, it allows you to kind of let them go. And I think that's an extremely powerful tool, something that we have no medicines for and very few techniques outside of meditation and prayer. So now I'm running a little bit lower on time, but just to kind of drive this point home, lots of improvements in mental health with this device. The next thing I want to talk about is blue light. Blue light is kind of an off switch for our brain to go to rest, to go to sleep. So if you're exposed to blue light, it tells your body that it's daytime and kind of sets a whole cascade of things in motion. Oftentimes I hear people say, I feel tired after dinner, and then I get my second wind. You're not getting a second wind, you're watching television. The blue light from the TV tells your brain that it's truly daytime. So that's how that works. So it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy TV before bed, but be mindful that you're going to be exposed to blue light. Use things like blue light blocking glasses, and potentially even change your bedroom to have only red light. That tends to help as well. Red light has the least potential to stimulate or to decrease melatonin production. Certainly avoid coffee if you have any sleeping problems. While in bed, making sure that your bedroom temperature is low. 65 degrees is typically what's recommended. There's lots of other devices now where you can actually change the temperature in bed. You guys have probably heard of the chili pad, that kind of thing. And this addresses a phenomenon where later in the night your body temperature drops, and it's actually a potent signal for your body to have deeper sleep. One of the reasons that people have sleep disturbance is actually their mattress or their blankets are too hot and keep their body temperature too low, and they can't actually work deep stages of sleep. So tools you can use: blackout curtains, earplugs, white noise machine, not putting your alarm clock in the bedroom. Then during the day, making sure that you're exposed to bright light. This is super important because it sets kind of an anchor in terms of your circadian rhythm, your sleep wake cycle. Moving daily is obviously important, and then avoiding exercise around bedtime is also critical. for the reason that it'll increase your body temperature and make it harder for your body temperature to drop. I want to explain one phenomenon also. So when people have, when they feel more relaxed after a warm shower before bedtime, they're able to sleep better. That's usually because the warm water causes all their blood vessels to vasodilate. When they get into bed, their body temperature drops. That's kind of how that happens. So, Whoop and Aura. Who here uses one of these devices? Okay, cool. So, less than I thought, that's okay. For those of you that don't know, Whoop is it measures your heart rate variability, and motion as well, to give users a recovery score, really what I think of more of as kind of like a resiliency score. In addition to tracking your sleep, it takes the movement and your heart variability all into consideration to kind of create that score. The Aura Ring tracks sleep in a similar fashion. There's lots of other sleep trackers out there, some made by Fitbit, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Aura Ring. I have no financial ties to this company whatsoever, but it's really the only one that I found decent research for. Now the Aura Ring certainly isn't perfect, but it's a really good tool. It has very high sensitivity, which means that if you're truly asleep, the Aura Ring will pick it up. But it has kind of lower specificity, meaning that the Aura Ring will say that you're asleep when you're actually awake at times. It's not a perfect device, but it's definitely the best that I've seen out there. So lastly, I want to touch real quick on inflammation. This is a little bit outside the scope of this talk because it's a little bit individualized, but to kind of be more general, inflammation is kind of a process where your body tries to repair damage for one reason or another. And this can be because of toxins, can be because of the things that you eat, can be because of an infection. Most common causes of inflammation for the average individual is likely food. And it's not just the bad food per se, but a lot of people have food sensitivities. This concept of food sensitivity, until recently was kind of thought to be something, not evidence-based, but it really is, honestly. And everyone's a little bit different, so that's kind of why it's important to experiment to see what you react to. Because even small amounts of food that that you're sensitive to can cause inflammation in the gut and then actually lead to more kind of low-grade systemic inflammation. So you did a work actually out of Harvard that they now think that actually having a leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability is a required prerequisite for autoimmune disease. So you have to have kind of this low-grade inflammation for you to develop autoimmune disease. Then the last picture here is to signify really toxins. Again, something that very few people talk about. A lot of the experiments that have been done to decide if something is safe or not safe are done on animals at super, super high doses. But there's very little research on what potential toxins do to our bodies at low doses for really long periods of time. No one's going to study something that takes 50 years to determine if it's harmful or not, right? But I can tell you that, specifically heavy metals, for example, having chronic exposure to those can make people very, very sick. And I'm talking about autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, that kind of thing. And really addressing that at times can make a huge difference. So, kind of in closing here, there's a couple different ways to measure resiliency. One is by symptoms. Certainly your fatigue, your poor sleep, exercise tolerance, that kind of thing. We can use questionnaires, we can use heart rate variability, and then finally we can use blood tests and actually urine tests as well. That's something that I do quite frequently in my practice, and we kind of monitor that together. So bringing it all together, really resiliency is the ability of the body and the mind to come back to baseline, to tolerate stress, to tolerate larger and larger amounts of stress. And in order for us to stay resilient, we have to monitor our workload, minimize perceived stress, get plenty of sleep, but then also manage our inflammation, remove as much inflammation as we can out of our world. And with that, I think really resiliency is equivalent to health. And the question is how to apply this tomorrow. Because a lot of people are in this situation, and honestly, until recently, I was as well. We're working really, really hard, we maybe have little ones to take care of. We have stress at work, and then we go to the gym to blow off some steam. When really the thing that we should be doing is just relax. Thanks, guys.
Fam on 3. 1, 2, 3.